Managed agents are one of the most powerful features that Claude has released because they allow you to basically build systems that don't just respond to prompts, but they actually perform work all on their own. But most finance professionals currently struggle to understand how to use this function correctly. So in this video, I'm going to show you exactly where to find managed agents inside Claude, what they actually are, and how to build one from the ground up. Now, the use case I'm building is a finance planning system that reads leadership meeting notes and updates a live forecast model automatically. Now, this is just the example here. Once you see how the system is built, you can then point it at any recurring workflow in your finance operation. And if you want the prompts and the data sets from this video, they're in my free community. Link is in the description below. For now, let's get into it. What is a managed agent? Before we build anything, I need to explain what a managed agent actually is, because it's different from everything else in Claude. When you use Claude in a normal chat, every conversation is basically self-contained. Claude responds to what you type, and when the conversation ends, that context just disappears. Whereas a managed agent is different. It is a persistent system with its own instructions, its own tool integrations, and its own runtime environment. It can connect to external services, it can maintain state across sessions, and it keeps operating independently of whether you're watching it or not. Now, you define its mission once, and then it just runs. Now, there is the agent itself, which holds the reasoning instructions. There is the runtime environment, which controls what tools and connections the agent can use. And then there's also the credential vault, which stores authentication security outside of the instructions. And there are sessions, which are the active executions where the agent actually does the work. So you configure all of this just once inside the Claude console, and then the system is ready to operate continuously. Now, this matters for finance because planning never really stops. New information keeps arriving from meetings, suppliers, and customers, and a chat can't watch for that. It can't be ready for that. Whereas an agent can sit in the background, and then it notices when something new appears, and then it acts on it. So with this in mind, I'm going to build an agent that continuously monitors leadership meetings, identifies business developments that impact financial performance, and then translates those developments into planning assumptions, updates a live financial forecast, documents every change through a complete audit trail, generates a executive ready finance update, and it does it all automatically. And the managed agent in Claude is the reasoning layer that sits in the middle, reading the meetings, deciding what changed in the business, and then updating the planning model. Setting up the infrastructure. Before we can build anything in Claude, we need to connect 3 external tools. Now, the first is Jamie. Jamie is an AI meeting intelligence platform that captures leadership discussions and turns them into structured records. It's a meeting tool built for professionals who work with confidential data and they can't afford to leak what gets discussed in their calls. Now, it doesn't send a bot into your meetings or route conversations through external systems. It runs directly on your device, capturing audio locally, which fundamentally changes how conversations happen because there's no third-party participant in the room. Now, what makes it different is how it manages and handles your data. It's built with a privacy-first architecture, fully GDPR compliant, hosted in the EU, and your data is never used to train external AI models. Everything is encrypted, is processed securely, and even audio files are deleted after processing. And that's what makes it usable in real finance environments where you're dealing with client data, maybe deal terms, internal performance numbers. All of these things are very important and should be highly confidential. Now, after meeting, it automatically generates a summary. It's a transcript, decisions and action items get flagged, and then the meetings I'm using for this demo, they're all captured through Jamie, and the agent will then query them through Jamie's MCP endpoint. Now, if you want to try Jamie yourself, the link is in the description below. The second is Zapier. And Zapier is an automation layer that connects different apps through a single interface. So instead of building separate integrations for Google Sheets, Gmail, Google Drive, well, the agent just reaches all 3 through one Zapier connection. So I set this up through Zapier's MCP service section. I add a new tool, I then choose Google Sheets, and I authorize it with the Google account that owns the workbook. And I repeat the same steps for Google Drive and Gmail. Now, once all 3 are authorized, they are available to the agent through that single Zapier connection. Now with Jamie and Zapier ready, I then move into the Claude console. And from the left navigation panel, I go to Managed Agents and click Quick Start. Now everything in this section comes from the first of the 3 prompts that I give the agent. Its only job here is infrastructure and validation. And before the agent touches any business data, it verifies that every dependency is actually working. So the prompt instructs the agent to connect and authenticate both Jamie and Zapier, and it's not allowed to assume that either one is working. So it confirms each before proceeding. For Jamie, the agent connects to the MCP endpoint and validates that it can access meeting history, retrieve summaries and transcripts, pull meeting IDs and timestamps, and locate newly created meetings. It retrieves the most recent available meeting as a live connection test only to confirm that the integration is functional. Now for the workbook, the agent searches connected Google Drive resources through Zapier, and it locates the nanochip finance planning model. It verifies the file exists, confirms it's accessible, and checks that it can be edited. It reads the tab structure and confirms that all 4 specific worksheets are present, and if any of those tabs is missing, execution stops. Now, running planning logic against a workbook that does not have the right structure creates errors that are then harder to diagnose than a clean stop at validation. Email delivery also gets validated through Zapier with Gmail as the fallback channel. The agent confirms outbound capability, HTML support, and recipient address availability without sending any messages. Now, once every check passes, the agent then generates a structured validation report covering Jamie status, Zapier status, workbook access, tab verification, and email capability. And that report is then the handoff point. Nothing runs until it reads clean. Inside the Managed Agent section, I click Create Agent. Now, Claude converts the validation configuration into a live agent definition and moves immediately to environment setup. I select limited to specific hosts for network access, and this restricts the agent to the MCP endpoints that it actually needs. Now, in a finance environment where the agent is reading a live forecasting model and sending emails on your behalf, that boundary matters very much from a governance standpoint. Claude then prompts me to configure a credential vault. The vault stores authentication for Jamie and Zapier separately from the agent instructions. Sensitive credentials are not embedded in the system prompt. They live in the vault and are referenced only during execution. Now I connect both integrations and the vault confirms them as active. Now the agent has secure access to everything it needs with no credentials living inside the workflow logic. Building the finance intelligence layer. With infrastructure confirmed, the second prompt transforms the agent from a connectivity validator into an actual finance planning analyst. The workbook architecture is worth understanding before we get into what the prompt actually does, because the model design is what makes the automation reliable. And that's the key, that it's reliable. Nanochip Industries uses a Google Sheets workbook with a centralized assumptions section. Revenue growth rate, customer demand adjustments, production volume, inventory build, component costs, hiring plans, operating expenses, and collection timing are all set in one location. Every calculation in the forecast model tab flows from those inputs through existing formulas. When an assumption value changes, the entire model recalculates automatically. The agent never writes to a formula cell. It updates assumption inputs only, and the workbook handles the rest. The second prompt defines exactly how the agent operates within that structure. For every leadership meeting retrieved from Jamie, the workflow runs 2 steps. First, it identifies which business event from the discussion affects the planning drivers. And then second, it determines what assumption changes those events actually justify. This is the rule that holds the system together. Every assumption change must be traceable to meeting evidence. So if leadership discussed a customer order delay, that justifies updating the inventory build and collection timing assumptions. It does not justify changing revenue growth or lowering the demand forecast. The agent modifies only what the conversation directly supports. Once it determines the required changes, it updates 4 areas of the workbook. The Finance Intelligence Hub gets the meeting source, a business summary, and the financial implications. The recommended finance action section gets a priority, an owner, and the expected impact. The latest agent changes section logs every assumption that moved with its previous and new values and the reason. And the activity log gets a new row tying the whole thing back to the meeting ID, making the system continuous. The third instruction turns the analyst into a continuous system. Now the agent now monitors Jamie for new meetings on a loop. Now when it finds one, it runs the full workflow, and when it does not, it just waits and then it checks again. The piece that makes this safe is duplicate protection. So before processing any meeting, the agent reads the activity log and looks for that meeting's ID. And if the ID is already there, then it just stops. It makes no update, sends no email, and writes no second log entry. The activity log is the agent's memory. Because that memory lives in the workbook rather than the session, it survives restarts. And without it, the same meeting could be processed again every time the agent restarted, updating the same assumptions over and over until the forecast was just wrong. The agent is also built to keep going when something fails. If a tool call breaks, it records the error, notes the meeting it was on, and then it continues with the rest of the work instead of just stopping the whole run. On the first test run, the monitoring did not behave quite as expected, and then the agent caught it itself. It reviewed its own run and then it suggested a few fixes. I took 2 of them. It tightened how it handles the wait between checks and made the email fallback stronger, then updated its own configuration before the next session. Now, once a meeting clears the duplicate check and the model is updated, the agent writes an executive briefing and sends it to the leadership inbox. The briefing reads like an FP&A work piece rather than a notification. It opens with an executive summary, then the meeting intelligence, a table of the assumptions that changed with their before and after values, and the project impact on revenue, margin, and cash. It closes with a recommended action and a status panel confirming each step finished. Zapier is the primary delivery path and Gmail here is the fallback, so a briefing still goes out if one of those routes fails. First meeting. With all 3 layers in place, I start a session and I give the agent a simple instruction to begin. It queries Jamie, it confirms its connections to Google Sheets, Google Drive, and Gmail, and then finds a meeting that has not been processed yet. The agent retrieves a leadership meeting from Jamie titled Epic Electronics Revenue Shift. The discussion covers a major semiconductor order that was delayed by 6 to 8 weeks. The customer had not cancelled, the total contract value was unchanged, the shipment moved from Q3 to Q4 because of the customer's internal rollout schedule. The agent reads the meeting and identifies this as a timing event. Demand has not changed, revenue growth expectations stay where they were, the customer demand assumption is untouched, the business has not lost anything. It has shifted when the cash and inventory will move, and that's it. The 2 drivers the meeting actually justifies are inventory build and collection timing. Inventory build adjustment moves from 4% to 7% because production continues on schedule while the shipment waits, which means finished goods accumulate. Collection timing adjustment moves from negative 2.0% to negative 4% because payments tied to that shipment will arrive later than planned. The model recalculates. Full year revenue holds at $156.8 million. Full year EBITDA holds at $28.3 million. The quarterly profile changes, Q3 inventory increases, and cash collections shift into Q4, creating a temporary working capital pressure that resolves once the shipment clears. The Finance Intelligence Hub updates with the meeting source and a summary that distinguishes the timing shift from a revenue loss. The latest agent changes section shows both assumption modifications with full before and after values. The activity log records the meeting ID, the business event, the two changes, the forecast impact, and confirms the email was delivered. The executive email goes out through Zapier automatically. It opens with the business context. A major customer delayed a shipment by 6 to 8 weeks. The order is intact. It frames the delay as a timing problem with the demand and the contract both intact. The email then shows the two assumptions that changed, the before and after values, and what happened to the forecast. Revenue and EBITDA held, inventory increased, and cash collections moved. The recommended action directs the team to monitor inventory levels, validate the new shipment timeline with the customer, and track the cash impact through Q4. Second meeting. The agent detects a second meeting. Supplier agreement gross margin expansion. Leadership confirmed the close of a new 12-month supplier contract that reduces component cost by approximately 8% starting July 2026. The supplier also committed to guarantee production capacity. Customer pricing is unchanged, which means the entire cost reduction goes directly to profit. The agent identifies this as a profitability event. Revenue, production volume, and customer demand are all untouched. The only driver that changed is the cost structure. Component cost adjustment moves from 2.0% to negative 6.0%. Revenue holds at 156.8 million. Gross margin increases from 47% to 51.1%. Gross profit moves from 73.6 million to 80.2 million. EBITDA moves from 28.3 million to 34.9 million. Projected cash improves from 41.5 million to 48 million. The business has not grown its revenue line. It is generating more profit on every unit it was already selling. Third meeting. The third meeting covers a manufacturing headcount expansion. Leadership approved hiring approximately 25 additional employees across production, engineering, and quality control. The existing workforce was projected to become a production ceiling as customer demand grows. Now, the expansion removes that ceiling. The agent determines two drivers require updating. Hiring expansion adjustment increases from 4% to 10%, reflecting the payroll cost of the additional workforce. Production volume adjustment increases from 5% to 7%, reflecting the manufacturing capacity that those employees will add once fully onboarded. There is a detail in this meeting worth noting. Leadership discussed positive customer demand signals during the session, but no firm orders had actually changed. The agent does not adjust revenue assumptions based on optimism. Revenue stays at 156.8 million because the meeting evidence does not justify changing it. So the model recalculates. Gross margin holds at 51.1% because hiring has no impact on component costs or pricing. Operating expenses increased from 45.3 million to 47.7 million as payroll rises. EBITDA declines from 34.9 million to 32.5 million. Projected cash decreases from 48 million to 45.6 million. Annual production capacity increases from approximately 2.14 million units to 2.2 million units, with Q4 output moving from 545,000 to 564,000 units. The executive email explains both sides of the trade-off. Near-term profitability declines because the payroll costs arrive before the revenue from increased capacity does. The business is investing in future throughput. The recommended action notes to monitor short-term cash carefully during onboarding and to hold revenue assumptions conservative until demand converts to confirmed orders. And that is the full system, a managed agent that monitors leadership meetings through Jamie, updates the assumptions in the planning model through Zapier, recalculates the forecast, logs every change, and emails leadership, running on its own until you tell it to stop. Remember, if you want the prompts and the data sets from this video, they're in the free community, which is linked in the description below, and I'll see you next time.